Welcome everyone. This lesson will cover the fundamentals of Lightwave Modeler. We'll take a look at the basic modeling tools in Lightwave to give users a very quick understanding of how this particular program in the Lightwave pantheon works and how it relates to other programs like Lightwave Layout. We'll start off by looking at the Create tab and work our way through some of the more basic modeling tools. In the end, you should have a pretty good understanding of how to utilize basic modeling tools and how they can be useful in conjunction with Lightwave Layout. So let's go ahead and start. First off, let me just adjust my window a little bit so you can see everything at the bottom and the sides here. As with all software programs, certain buttons and menus will change in time. So if your version of Lightwave looks a little different than this, you shouldn't have a problem locating the similar tools or the same exact tools wherever they have been moved with the help of maybe the help menu or the manual. Alright, so first off, let's go ahead and understand that we're looking at a 4-window layout, and this is standard in Lightwave Modeler, because we typically need to see our models from more than one perspective when we're building, as opposed to layout where we typically often work with 2 windows or 1 window depending upon what we're doing. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and hit the D key for display options, and that'll be our first keyboard shortcut of the lesson. This display option panel is very handy because it allows you to switch from multiple layouts. So if you do want to switch to a single layout as the default, you can. Of course, you can also do the same thing in a number of different ways, and the way you would switch to a full view of other windows in Modeler would be to use this button here in the upper right panel, and you can click it again to go back to your quad view. But you notice that all of these smaller windows have this button and they allow you to go full screen, so it's a quick way you can do that. There are other keyboard shortcuts for doing this, but I find that people often get confused with those, so I'm going to stick to that. You can adjust the view by using the other side of this panel that we just started with. So you can go from top, for example, to bottom, to back, to right, to left. So to get a better understanding of how these views work, it's important to have a model to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and load up a model that should be included with your basic Lightwave package. If it's not, you can load up a different model. It really doesn't matter for this lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and choose an object that I commonly refer to, the cow.lwo, and this is again part of the basic set. When you load up an object, the screens don't automatically resize to fit the object into the screen. You need to do that manually. So here's another keyboard shortcut for you. Hit the A key for autofit, and then when that happens, you'll see your entire model all fitting in all 4 windows. So now you can better understand what these mean. So top view, I'm looking at the top of the cow. The bottom, of course, goes underneath. And you may not see a total difference right away when you're looking in wireframe view mode, but we'll talk about that next. But just to give you a basic understanding, yes, front and perspective view. Alright, so let's put this back to top view, and we'll just go and take a look at some of the other windows that are already set up to different views. So, as you can see by default, we can see the object from a number of different angles, which is important as we're working on models. Perspective view is perhaps the most different because it allows us, unlike these other orthographic views where we can only move in 90-degree angles, we can go ahead and switch to a perspective angle by using this rotation button here. Alright, and again, I'm just clicking here on this little rotation. You'll notice that that is not possible with the orthographic views like top, back, or right. So this allows me to kind of see what the cow looks like in 360 degrees. Next to your choice of view, you have the ability to change the way that the object is viewed as well. By default, it goes to wireframe with many of these views, but you can change that to a texture shade view so you can see what the cow would look like with the surfacing applied. Texture wired is the same thing, but with a polygonal undermesh visible at the same time. A lot of times in Modeler, you're going to want to stick to the layout, the wireframe layout, because it allows you to see the points and polygons in an accurate way so you can modify those. But oftentimes, by default, the perspective view will be left to texture shade. You can zoom in on any of these views using the magnifying glass. And you'll notice that that button, I'm just clicking and dragging with my mouse from left to right as I click and hold with my left mouse button. So the only button we haven't really looked at is this one here. It allows us to move again and sort of push our view from right to left, top to bottom, along these different axis points. So that's a quick overview of what these control buttons allow for when it comes to viewing your model. Before we go any further, we should probably address the fact that in 3D space, we have coordinates on the X, Y, and Z planes. So it's important to get comfortable with these right away. From the top, you'll see I have a little X here, a little Z there, a little Z here, a little X there. So what that means is that if I were to move my cow from left to right, I'd be moving along this x-axis, or if I move it front to back, it would be along the z-axis. And you can see that perhaps better in the perspective view, where again you have these coordinates illustrated for you. Now over here on the right view, I can also see the vertical parameters of the y-axis. So I can go ahead and move this cow up or down to bring it closer to the floor or higher up in the air on the y-axis. And you see those coordinates will change over here in the bottom left corner where it says position. More on that later when we get into layout, but I just wanted to address that before we got any further. At this point, we've only navigated the viewing angles and methodology of the object, so we haven't really done anything to the object yet. So let's talk about editing the object. First off, when you edit an object, there are different modes in which you are engaging that object. So you have polygon mode, edge mode, and point mode. Now in my version of Lightwave, they're located up here on the left column, but in yours they may be down here at the bottom. So points edit mode allows me to interact with points rather than polygons. So what is the difference? Well, to better understand the difference between a point and a polygon, let's zoom in on this full view, and I'll hit A once again for AutoFit. These junction points here where these triangles meet, these are the points that build up the object. So if I were to try and select multiple points in point edit mode, I can do that in a number of different ways. One good shortcut to remember is to use your right mouse button on your mouse, click and drag it, and then you can lasso an area of your cow. So when I do that, I'm able to select a particular range of points, and you can see them all lit up there in orange. Now, Lightwave's a little strange when it comes to selecting and deselecting, in that I can't select any more points with those currently selected. It will not let me. I have to deselect all of these points. In order to do that, I would need to lasso with the right mouse button once again to deselect those. Now I can engage more points. Another way to do that, and perhaps a better way to do that, is to use another keyboard shortcut. That's the / key or the question mark key on your keyboard. So if I were to select points and click that key, it deselects everything rather than me having to pinpoint exactly which points I'm going to reselect. So this rule applies for points or for polygons. So what are polygons? Let's go to polygon edit mode. And, well, maybe I'll jump back to that full screen again for you to see. And now when I click and drag, I'm selecting, you'll see the shapes. These shapes are the polygons. These are the building blocks that allow Lightwave to render shapes, to build a surface. So the points and the polys work together to create this three-dimensional object. Same rules apply. If I want to deselect, I would have to lasso those again or use the / key. Another couple tricks here with selecting. I can click and drag to select initially, but you notice I can't do that continually. But if I hold down my Shift key to add to the selection, then yes, I can do that. So another keyboard shortcut there for you. The Shift key will add to a selection based upon what's already selected. And again, you can still use your lasso ability with your right mouse button. Okay, so now we've gotten a little bit deeper into editing our object in terms of now we're able to select certain parts of the object before we make changes to them with the other tools. The last selection mode that we'll look at is edge mode. And edge mode allows us to select the edges of polygons rather than the polygons themselves. So I can select only specific edges rather than the entire polygon. Alright, so again, the / key or the question mark key will deselect that. I'm going to go back to a quad view and hit A for autofit once again. Hopefully you're already getting the hang of some of these keyboard shortcuts that are more handy and that we'll use more often. So this is how we interact with a fully built model like this cow. This is at least the beginning of the process. We'll come back to that later on and we'll try editing more complex objects, but at this point what I'd like to do is to go forward and build a very simple shape with some of our primitive tools. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to go ahead and clear out the cow. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Close Object. Close Object. I only have one object open, so closing all objects isn't really necessary, but if I had multiple, I could do that. Let's close the object, and let's create a primitive. So this box tool allows us to create either a plane, a rectangular plane, or we can build a three-dimensional box. I'll start in the top view by building a 2D plane. You can see there in my perspective view that yes, it is two-dimensional and flat. If I now come down to the back view, I can continue on this and grabbing those orange handles and extracting or extruding here this three-dimensional box. And now you can see it has volume. I can continue to adjust the volume and the proportions of this box by using these orange handles. I can move the box by grabbing the X in the center at any of these viewports. This is how you adjust these primitive tools in what we call template mode. Template mode means that I can still grab and adjust these handles to make changes. Once I leave template mode, I can no longer do that. Now you cannot keep your objects in template mode. They have to be fully formed and turned into a complete object when you want to go forward. In other words, I couldn't do anything with this box if I left it like this. I have to make the object. Okay? So to make the object, another very important keyboard shortcut, the return key. When you hit the return key, that will make the object. That will actually form it into something substantial, so rather than just leaving it in template mode. When I do that, as you can see, all of the handles go away and it becomes a solid volume. And I can still make changes to this, I can still edit it, but I can no longer do it with the ease of grabbing those handles. Alright, so at that point, I've created my first simple object, a box. And you can see this is what it looks like in wireframe view mode. Here's my perspective view on the same object in that box. So let's go back and talk a little bit about point and polygon edit modes. If I were to want to edit just one side of this box, I could select polygon edit mode and click on one side of the box to edit that. I could then do a simple adjustment to make this box change size, similar to what we did with template mode. One of the most common adjustment tools under the Modify tab is the Move tool. And the Move tool exists both in Layout and in Modeler. The keyboard shortcut for the Move tool is the T key. I'm going to click on the T key, and you can see my cursor changed into the icon of the Move tool. Lightwave icons, when it comes to the cursor, are helpful because they will tell you what mode you're in by looking at them. So if you get comfortable with them, you'll get an understanding of what tool is currently active. So even though I'm polygon edit mode, that's just the edit mode. That's not the tool. The tool is the Move tool. And it's actually buried underneath the Modify tab. There it is, and there is the Move tool already selected because I used the keyboard shortcut of the T key. Here's a handy little hint. If you ever want to know the keyboard shortcut for a tool, you can look in the right-hand side of the button. If there is a keyboard shortcut for that tool, it will be visible there in light gray. If there has not been one assigned to it, like for example the Tweak tool does not have a keyboard shortcut, there are ways that you can adjust in the preferences of Lightwave. You can actually go ahead and adjust and give it and assign it a keyboard shortcut. Now, for educational purposes at the college, we do not do that, because if we did, then it could confuse other people who use our labs and use Lightwave in the lab. But if you have Lightwave at home, feel free to go ahead and give that a try. But because of, for our own protectionist reasons in the lab, we don't really cover that in this class. Anyway, the Move tool has a keyboard shortcut assigned to it, the T key, and if I were to grab a handle here and just move it, I can move this polygon here, and you can see I'm scaling the box by moving that one polygon. Had I selected more than one polygon, then it would be adjusting it very differently, but since I only selected one, it's scaling the object accordingly. Alright, so that's a simple tweak or a simple adjustment to the existing object utilizing polygon edit mode. Now if I were to use point edit mode, I can grab point and do the same thing. Hit the T key to move it, and you'll notice now I'm adjusting it in a very different way by using points. Alright, so you're starting to get the idea. I hope that the mode and the tool work hand in hand in adjusting your object to get you to help you build what it is you're looking to build. So that is our first primitive tool. Let me go back to the Create tab. That's the box tool. I could then build this box into a more complicated object by continuing on with more primitives, or perhaps using more adjustments. But before we go on to our next primitive tool, the ball, let's talk a little bit about layers in Lightwave. Right now, I have a brand new object that has not been named, it has not been saved to my hard drive. It doesn't really exist anywhere other than just in this temporary workspace where I'm adjusting it. So the first thing you want to do to make your object real, substantial, is to save it. So you go to File, and we can choose Save Object As. Save Object As. When you click on that, it's going to ask you, what do you want to name the object? I'll go ahead and call it the box, just because that's all it is at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and save this right now. Temporarily, I'll put this on my local hard drive, but depending on where you're working, again, just save it accordingly, save it to a safe space. Alright, once it's been saved, now I've got a name. You can see there's the name there appearing on this pop-up window, box. So if I were to have more than one object open at the same time, I could navigate between those two multiple objects by using this panel. Layers are over here on the right. This number and this arrow refers to the multiple rows you have of your layers. We can have as many layers as we need by using more than one row. But our first row is this set of rectangles that you see in front of you. So I've got two groups of 5 rectangles. So I've got a total of 10 layers at my disposal initially. But again, I could go to, here's my second row or third row. I can have as many, 20, 30, 40 layers if I need to. The little dot in this first layer tells me that there's something in that layer. And the fact that these don't have any dots, that tells me there's nothing in those layers yet. But if I were to click on layer 2, you notice that layer 1 is no longer visible even though it's still there. So let's go ahead and go to the ball tool. I'm going to click and drag like I did with my left mouse button. The same process I just did with my box tool. And I'm going to extrude it in my back view here by grabbing that handle. Again, you can see the orange handles. I'm still in template mode here on the ball tool. And I can continue to grab these or move it from the center to readjust my ball. This ball that we're looking at is in layer 2. And I know that by seeing the little dot on the second box. If I want to go back to layer 1 and look at my box, there it is. Click on layer 2, there's my ball. Alright, now I hit the return key to make that ball, just like I did with the box. If you've forgotten that, that's the return key to make it. But you'll notice that all of these boxes have diagonal lines slashing through them. That means if I click on the bottom half of that layer 1, I can see the outline in black of the box that's there and how that relates to the ball. This is useful when you're trying to build an object that is all one object based upon multiple layers. Say, for example, you had a character who had a head and a hat, and you wanted the hat to be on a separate layer. You could then model the hat in relationship to the size and scale of the head by using this technique. So often during the class, I may tell you to put layer 1 in the background. When I say put layer 1 or layer 2 or layer 3 in the background, that's what I'm talking about. Click on the bottom half of that button. Excuse me. Alright, so if I want to look at both layers at the same time, I hold down the shift key and I click on both layers. Now I can see it's no longer just an outline, but an actual solid box mixed with my solid ball. The advantage of using layers is that you can edit things quickly and easily without having to worry. So if I hit the T key to move, and I want to move my ball, you notice it does not affect the box. So this enables me to build complicated shapes quickly and easily without having to worry about constantly selecting and not selecting the wrong elements. So you can see how this can really have its advantages when it comes to building complex objects. So again, I can have as many layers as I might need and as many rows of layers I might need. In making these adjustments, the box no longer just says box, it has a little asterisk next to it. The little asterisk tells you that you have not saved your object recently, meaning that changes have been made to your object that you did not save. So it's a good idea to get in the habit of saving as you go. The S key is the keyboard shortcut for saving. S for save. If I click on that S key, that little asterisk goes away because now that object called box has been updated with its new layer. Alright, so as I build in this manner, you can see that I can have a more complex object built of as many primitives as I might need. I'll go ahead and layer 3, if you're following along. Go ahead and grab the disk primitive. And I'm going to extrude that, and you'll see that this gives me a cylinder rather than a ball. It started off looking like the ball, but when I extruded it, it became just a cylinder with a straight side to it. So again, I have a template mode, just like all the other primitives, and when I hit the return key, that template mode goes away. Let's take a look at a couple panels that can be really useful as you're building simple shapes. The first one is the N key, another keyboard shortcut. I know I'm throwing a lot of these at you, but hopefully you're taking notes. N for numeric. What that means is I can go ahead and watch the parameters or adjust the parameters of my primitive as I build it. So that may not make any sense to you, but let me try and demonstrate. Let's go to layer 4, and I will go ahead and grab the cone. I'm going to, again, it looks similar to the ball when it starts, but when you extrude it, you can see it is in fact a cone. You'll notice that the numeric panel now is full of options. I can change the center. I can dial in an exact number of where I want that center located on the X, Y, and Z coordinates. This may be too numeric for a lot of you, especially if you're beginning. I know for most of my students, this is really looks technical and scary, and they don't really want to mess with it. So I'm not going to say this is mandatory or you know the best way to do it, but it does allow you certain options that are more allow you to build the object in a more exact way. You can, for example, fine-tune how many segments this object is going to have, how many sides it's going to have. Right now it's got 24 of these individual lines, so if I were to increase that number to 36, you can see that now it's got a lot more lines, a lot more density to it. So it gives me exact custom control of what it is I may need from this particular primitive. I can lower that as well, go with a much more basic shape, and you can see it looks more tessellated or looks more rough, looks more, you know, it doesn't look as smooth as it did when it had 24. And you can drag on these little slider buttons here, right or left, with your mouse button, and it will drop or raise the number accordingly based upon how much you slide the mouse. So it's another option that you see in Lightwave, a lot of these little arrow buttons, these little slider buttons. Alright, so that's the numeric panel, and again, that's the N key for numeric to go ahead and create that. So you hit the return key to make it. You notice now I've got already 4 layers built. So you can imagine that when you start building a lot of layers, it's going to get confusing if you don't have names to them, because you just have these little dots and you know, can't remember which dot is which. It's not going to be very useful. So let's look at another panel. Hit the L key. Excuse me, my bad. I always think that it's intuitive. You would think that it would come up right with the L, but not all keyboard shortcuts coincide with the tool or the panel that they use. Unfortunately, it would be nice. So I'm going to go to the Windows as a reminder, because I always want to hit L, but it's not. It's F7, actually. Now, the function keys can be tricky. If you're working on Lightwave in the labs at school, then you may find that, well, the function keys are not working as they would at home with your home computer. So I will leave it up to you as to figure out how to access the Layers panel, but you can always find it here under Windows. It's the top option. So if you click on that, here's your layers. Alright, so now here's my box. That's the name of it. Again, it's got the asterisk because I haven't saved it recently, so maybe I should hit the S key there. Now the asterisk is gone. Now, if I click on that little triangle, that little black triangle, it points downwards now, and I can see that I've got all these unnamed layers, 1 through 4. So I can go ahead and start giving them names. So I can start saying, okay, this is the box layer. And I'm just double-clicking on these to make it fast and easy. And this is the ball. And this one is the cylinder. And this one is the cone. Alright, so now it makes it a lot easier, and all I have to do is click on these names and I get the layer that I'm looking for. So if you're looking for like an arm, a leg, an eyeball, or whatever, you can sort of click on these multiple layers and you know exactly what you're getting. And the check mark indicates F for foreground. That means that the cylinder's in the foreground layer, or the ball, or what have you. The B stands for background. So if I wanted the ball to be in the background, layer visible, I can click on that directly and make it happen. I can also hold down the shift key as I would in the other space, and I can add all of these other elements to the background. So this gives you immediate, direct, I think a little more intuitive control over your layers and how they work. Alright, I'll go ahead and close this out, and again, you can always find this under Windows Layers. For the purpose of this demo, I have a pretty limited screen size and workspace just to save real estate. So if you're working on a larger screen, you may want to keep these windows open, like your numeric panel and your layers panel. It doesn't hurt to leave them open all the time. I'm not doing it for just, you know, to save real estate space, like I said, but you certainly could if you find it's useful for you as you work. Alright, so the primitives work the same way. We've just gone through 4 of them, and you know that how exactly they handle things: the cone, the disc, the ball, the box. The capsule is no different. So I'm going to go through all of these, but you have a toroid, which gives you kind of like a donut shape, and so on and so forth. But these are your primitives. Now in Lightwave, every time you see the little button that says More, that means that your screen is not large enough to display all of the buttons that should be there. So I can click on that and actually find more primitives where they are hiding. So if you'd like to explore a couple more of these, go for it. But we're going to keep this simple and we're going to move on. All right, let's go and create a brand new object. I'll hit S to save this one, the box. I'm going to go to File, New Object. And if I know this, my menu's not coming up on your screen, but just click on New Object. It should be the very top option. Now I've got an unnamed object and I've still got my box. So my box disappeared, but it's still there. All we have to do to go to this panel in the upper right center and it will definitely be there. So now I'm ready to build something different, something else. All right, let's go ahead and explore some of the other options to make polygons. You have other tools beyond the primitives, and one of those, the most basic tools, is just the points tool. The points tool allows you to make points by clicking on your right mouse button, and as you can see, I'm building kind of a connect the dots, like those little games you played when you were a kid to connect the dots. That's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm just building dots that I can then connect into a polygon. Now Lightwave does remember the order in which you build these dots, so it is important to click them in a sequence if you're going to turn this into a polygon. Now to make this into a polygon, I can use the keyboard shortcut P, or I can click on the button Make Polygon. There it is. Now I've made a simple polygon shape. It's flat, it has no dimension to it, but I can extrude that and turn it into a three-dimensional object using some of the other tools. But since we're kind of just going through this panel by panel, I'll just kind of leave it there. Now, one thing I should mention before we go any further is the concept of sides. And if you explored some of your other shapes earlier, you may have noticed that there's two sides. The top side, and in this case the bottom side, is invisible. When I click and rotate below that shape, it just disappears as soon as I go and look underneath it. So that's because everything in Lightwave, by default, all polygons are single-sided. What this does is it saves render time on objects that don't need to be rendered multiple sides. So in this case, if I wanted to leave this shape flat and I wanted it to flip or rotate, I would need to have it create a second side. So to make an object two-sided, you can do that a number of ways. One is I could copy and paste this, flip it, merge the points, and so it's kind of a long, arduous process. The faster way is to go to your surface editor and click on double-sided at the bottom. Now, the surface editor is a complex string of, well, not so complex, but it is a lot of options. There's a lot of choices, and it may look complex when you look at it. Don't worry about all these other settings. We're going to have a whole lesson just for surfacing. So for our purposes now, all you need to worry about is going to the surface editor and clicking on the very last button, double-sided. Okay? If it's not the last button on your menu, just look for double-sided and click on it. Now, I'm going to close that and go back, and you can see that now it does have a bottom. It's double-sided. Got a top and it got a bottom. All right, this is important also as we start to edit primitive shapes, because if we were to go inside a primitive and erase part of it, then look inside, we would need to make it double-sided so that we can see the inside of that primitive. All right, so let's go ahead and look at another one of these tabs. The Multiply tab has a variety of choices that we're going to take a look at some of these, and we're going to take a look at some of these. But what I would like to do for now, since we have a 2D flat primitive, I would like to turn this into a three-dimensional object. I can do that by going to the Multiply tab and choosing Extrude. The Extrude tool allows me to click and drag in a viewport to basically kind of do what we saw with the cylinder tool, where we turned a flat, circular-looking shape into a geometric, well, a volume. So I'm going to click and drag on the back view, and I'm just going to click straight down on the back view. You can see by doing that, I'm actually able to generate. I can put a little tilt in there, make it kind of skewed, or I can go straight down. And if I just very careful, there we go. And so now I've made a volume out of this. And so I can hit the return key to make it. Again, it's whenever you see orange, you know you're in template mode. You haven't actually made it yet. Click on the return key and it's done. Now I can spin around this in 3 dimensions and see my new shape that I created. And now it's a volume. Again, that's the extrude tool. One thing we haven't talked about is erasing or deleting polygons. And we should probably get into that before we go too deep. So let's talk about that. So if I wanted to, say, cut a hole in this now that it's got volume, maybe I want to rip the top off. Let's go to polygon edit mode, and I'm going to click on the top, poly only. And what I want to do is try deleting it. Now, this can be a source of confusion in Lightwave that I want to address right now. Lightwave, at least as I record this, still has the keyboard shortcut combination. It's a little bit confusing. In layout, if you hit the minus key, you actually delete an object. And so when people learn layout, they often forget that Modeler is different. When you hit the minus key in Modeler, it hides a polygon. So if I click on the minus key, it looks like it deleted it, but it didn't. It just hid the object or whatever was selected or visible. To get it back, I need to go to View and then choose Unhide. Now it brings it back. This is really critical, guys, that you understand this right now. Hiding is not deleting. If you think that you've deleted something and you've only hidden it, when you send it over to layout, it's going to still be there. And you're going to be thoroughly confused as to why it's still there. So let me just say this, and hopefully it'll stick. The small delete key on your keyboard, you have 2 on a Mac. There is a large delete key and a small delete key. Alright, I'm talking about the delete key that is in its own little area next to the end key, underneath the function key. It's the small one. Hit that key. That is an erased polygon. Alright? If I unhide it, it will not come back. That is gone. Alright? By the way, the keyboard shortcut for unhide is a reverse slash. But yes, so that is a critical difference. Alright, and as you can see, everything is double-sided on this surface, and I can see inside my box. However, if in the surface editor I did not click double-sided, this is what it would look like. So if you're ever having this issue, it's simply because it's not double-sided. Surface editor is your friend. Alright, so there's the inside of my box. Hopefully that's clear. And again, when we get into layout, we will talk about keyboard shortcuts for that. But just remember, in Modeler, the subtract key hides things, which may be useful to you. You may have a use for that. It can be a handy function, as long as you understand what it does and what it is you're actually doing. The problem is most people forget, and they confuse the two, because Lightwave and layout, you know, it can be very confusing. I will admit that. Anyway, that is how you delete a polygon if it is selected. If nothing is selected, Lightwave assumes that you want to address the entire object. Right now, no points are selected, no polygons are selected. I'm in polygon mode, so that's all that matters. If I hit the delete key again, it erases everything. Luckily, in Lightwave, you have multiple undos. So I can go in Modeler, go to Edit Undo, or Command Z for short, and it will undo those processes, and I can actually undo again to bring back my top. Now, layout does not have multiple undos, only Modeler. So just be aware of that, at least as I'm recording this. Modeler has multiple undos, layout does not, so you'll be stuck if you're planning on going back more than once on layout. But Modeler, you can go back several times. Alright, let's go back now to the Create tab and just talk about a couple other tools here. The text tool can be really useful, but I would say that in most cases, if you're making a movie, text is better done in a 2D video editing program. Now, programs that you might use, for example, Final Cut Pro, have extensive titling abilities, and they can even do 3D now, and they're very good at what they do. I wouldn't suggest you do it in Lightwave. People think that, because Lightwave is a 3D tool, and that it's good at everything, and it's pretty good at most things, but it's not the best at everything. There's specialized tools that do other things better. But let's say, for example, you needed to build a sign, and you needed it to be in 3D, and you had no other choice, and so you needed it in your model, so you actually had to make 3D text. Let's go ahead and try it. I will go to Layer 2, and I'll give this, what I'm building, a name just to develop good habits in you. Let's go to Save Object. We'll call this Test Shapes. And once again, you can see I can go back to my box or my new object called Test Shapes at any time. I'm on Layer 2 right now. I'm going to the Text tool. I'm going to click on there. And if I go to my numeric panel, before I do this, I can see quite a few options. So let me click off of my text tool, go back for a second. I'm going to hit the N for numeric, put that over here, and now I'll go back to my text tool. And I'll choose the back view for this. I'm going to click, and you can see I've got quite a few options here. So if I type my text here in this little numeric panel, I will just type in the name of the software, Lightwave. I can go ahead and choose an axis by which the text is going to be created. And then I can choose a font that I want to use. Let me just go ahead and choose something basic, some basic system font like Arial would be great. Let me just go choose Arial. Alright, on top of that, I want to just choose left alignment, the scale is fine, and we'll go from there. So if I'm using the little orange handle, I can actually adjust some of these settings directly in that template handle. But it's usually better with a complex tool like this to use the numeric panel. So let me go ahead and just adjust the scale to make this larger. Let me go and I'm going to select scale. I'm going to type in like 500. Let's see. That's getting bigger. Still not quite big enough for what I'm doing. Let's go with 800. Now we're starting to see shapes a little bit better, but let me go and adjust also the kerning. And probably even less. That's going to pull. There we go. Let me zoom in a bit. And now you can start to see the letters that I'm building. And here they are. I'm going to rotate. Can I get this? There we go. Now here's the handle I was telling you about. If I drag this up, I can make it bigger. If I drag this little handle out, I can adjust the kerning so I can get the letters spaced the way I want. And just kind of scale this up or down. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see better. I can move the placement and all that. So it's pretty cool. I don't recommend you use this with complicated fonts. The more ornate display fonts, forget about it. I would just stick to really basic fonts like Arial Black or Arial. These tend to work really good, but some of the other more complicated fonts do not. So I will hit the return key to make this and close out my numeric panel, and there is my rather flat looking text. But again, as we learned, we can go to multiply, we can use extrude, and I can just use this top view and just give it some volume, and I can make this as deep as I want, and I can skew it and hit the return key to make it. And there we go. Now I've got Lightwave written rather dramatically. A to autofit, and there, we're on our way. So once again, text work is usually better done in a program for, that's designed for video editing like Final Cut Pro. But if for whatever reason you really want to do it in 3D, or you want to do it in Lightwave, or if you just feel like you need to for your models or whatever, then this is the text tool that will get you there. Alright, I'm not going to go into some of the more detailed tools like curves, and we're going to skip past that. We're going to now head towards more practical things like the Modify tab, and let's go back to basics. So as I mentioned, the move tool is something you should really memorize the keyboard shortcut, which is T, because we're going to use the move tool a lot. The good news is the keyboard shortcut for the move tool is the same as it is in Modeler as it is in Layout, so that's the good news, because unlike the subtract key, it's the same and it won't confuse you. Another keyboard shortcut is right next to the T, it's the Y key, and that is the rotate tool. Alright? The rotate tool is really critical because, again, it's one of the most basic features in Lightwave that you would need access to and know how to use. It lets you rotate your object in a number of different ways. Depending upon the viewport that you are using the tool in and where you click and drag, you can rotate in different ways. So I'm on the top view, I'm spinning here along the Z-axis. Or I can grab it in the right view and spin it there, do a little barrel roll along the X-axis. Or I can grab it here in the back view and do a Y-axis spin, so you get the idea. Alright. T for move, Y for rotate. Alright, the drag tool can be very useful when you're doing details. The drag tool works by dragging out points. So for example, let's just grab the little T here, little point there, and just move it up, and I've created a little dramatic flare there with my my T on my Lightwave. So that's the drag tool. We'll come back to that most likely with other lessons that we do, certainly in class, if not on these video tutorials. But the drag tool can definitely provide immediate access to points without going into the polygon edit mode. Alright, just trying to go again. This is an overview. We're just going to hit on certain points that are really important. Center. The center tool is critical because it allows you to create the physical center of your object. Meaning that if I click center all, it puts the text right in the middle of the universe according to the extreme top, the extreme bottom, the left and the right. It centers it. Now, you may not want that to be the center. Say, for example, if you wanted the text to rotate with the W as the center, I could then use the T key to move and put the W right there in the middle where the zero-axis points meet. Now, the W is this kind of the center of this object. So if I were to send this over to layout and rotate it, then the W would become the center. But in most cases, the center tool, when you choose center all, that just puts your object right in the middle according to its extremes and is usually the safest way to figure out the actual center of your object before you save it and send it over to layout. So if I ever tell you to center your object, this is what I'm talking about. Center all. Center all. Other tools that will prove useful that are pretty simple. The stretch tool, one of the most basics, does exactly what you think it would do. The size tool, it uniformly scales it up or down, larger or smaller. Alright, a couple of the fun ones like the bend tool, lets you grab a side and bend it. You can see, look, I'm actually bending my text. It's kind of fun, like I'm kind of inchworm. The twist tool, I bet you can't guess what that does. Fun little curly cue here. There's the twist. A lot of fun with these. Alright. Again, it depends upon which viewport you're twisting or bending as to how it's going to work. If I grab it over here, it's going to twist a very different way. Or here. Same with the bend, which I didn't demonstrate, but here you go. Easy to get carried away and completely lost if you're not careful, so just be aware. The multiply tab we've seen. We didn't extrude here, but there are other things that it can do. We'll demonstrate a couple of these. Before I do that, let's go to a new layer. We go to the Create tab, make a box, real simple. Simple little box here, put it in the middle more or less, hit the return key. Alright, let's try now the Multiply tab. The bevel tool is kind of like extruding, but you're basically choosing one polygon and beveling it out. Well, usually. You can bevel everything at once. If you bevel everything at once, it's going to do this. So it's going to be a little crazy, a little hard to control when you're, but you certainly could. That's what a bevel does. But since that's a little confusing, let's try one at a time. Let's click on the bevel tool to deselect it. By the way, to deselect a tool with the keyboard, spacebar, there you go. So now, if I wanted to select the top poly only, now you notice I've only got the top polygon selected. Bevel only the top part. I'm just going to click upwards and then shift to the left with my mouse button, left mouse button. You can see I can build a little house there. Kind of looks like one of those Monopoly pieces for a hotel or for a house. And there's your bevel. What a bevel does, it adds geometry, but it not only adds an additional plane, but it adds connecting geometry, as you can see, which in this case built the rest of the roof. If I hit the T key to move it, I can adjust this bevel like so, or I can make it go inward and make a little box out of it. Fun to play with, but we will definitely be coming back to the bevel tool to fully explore what it's capable of doing with other modeling techniques. Let me just deselect by the / key, or, well, before I can deselect, this is a good point here. If I have a tool selected like the Move tool, and you can see there's my Move tool icon, I have to hit the spacebar first, so I have to drop the tool. And I know this is kind of confusing, but you have to drop the tool like that with my spacebar before you can deselect with the / key. Now I can deselect the polygon. Okay, so drop tool first, polygons are points second. The mirror tool allows you to draw a line, and whatever is on the left of that line will suddenly appear magically onto the right of that line. Hit the return key to make it, and before you know, you can build yourself a small village real fast. Before you know it, here we go. Just mirroring, drawing more lines, and next thing you know, I've got 8 houses. Alright, so that's the mirror tool. Some of these tools, I hesitate to go over them now because I don't think it's really going to be helpful at this point, so I'm just going to skip over them. The knife tool we'll come back to, and some other tools, but let's just leave it at that for now. Alright, so when it comes to building simple elements, simple shapes, simple objects, you really don't need to dig too deep into the interface to construct basics. And so at this point, that's all I really want from you. I want you to explore the basics, get a thorough understanding of them before we move forward, because if you don't understand the fundamentals that I've showed you at this point, then it's going to be really difficult to move forward. So here's a good exercise for you to explore this deeper. And I'll go ahead and get you started. So the first thing we're going to do is go to File, New Object. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a snowman using layers. So we're going to go to the Create tab, and we're going to choose a ball. And I'm just going to go ahead and build a little sphere for the base of the snowman. I'll go ahead and make it, because I can always scale it up. And let me show you another trick on the surface editor. If I go to the surface editor, which I told, we'll explore this later in depth, but I told you about double-sided. Let's click on that, but let's also click on smoothing. Okay, because when I click on smoothing, look what happens. It becomes nice and smooth. I don't get that tessellated look for the ball. For layer 2, click on layer 2, put layer 1 in the background to use it as a reference, and we're going to practice building a snowman just by using layers. It's a really good exercise. Build this one slightly smaller, get it, the shape that you want using the template, and just kind of build that piece by piece. There's his middle. Maybe he should be a little bigger. Here's my top view. Hit the return key to make it. Great. Layer 3. Let's put both layers in the background so we can kind of build this as we go. Ball. I'm starting my back view, but you can really start wherever you're comfortable. It's a good practice to getting, scaling, moving, adjusting. It's a really good practice. There's the head. Maybe I'll go a little bigger. Also gives you plenty of practice at using these handles to zoom and to move around. Use your perspective view. Let's get some practice in here. Alright, I'll make that. There's my third. And because I'm using layers, if I change my mind, if I want to move around after template mode, I can just grab the move tool and just move it. And I can always, of course, go to my modify tab and use my size or stretch tools to kind of adjust it further. So, you're not stuck just because you hit the return key. Let's go to layer 4. Let's put that layer in the background. We can start building the face. So I'll go to the create tab and I'll take the cone tool and let's build him a little carrot nose. Alright, maybe I'll choose the right view for that to start it, and actually that was not a great choice, but that's okay. There's my cone. Just building out a small little cone for the nose. Hit the return key to make it. Now we can practice with our rotate tool, Y for rotate, to get it, properly oriented for his face. And if I can't really tell what's his front or his back, this is going to kind of decide things. Where is his front? Where is his back? Well, maybe this is the front. Let me hit the T key to move it. Put the nose right about there in the middle. Looks pretty good. And hit the Y key to rotate it if I want to just kind of tilt it a little bit. Let's get a good perspective on this. That looks pretty good. Alright, fair enough. Go with that. So you can kind of get the idea. Next, we can build a coal, pieces of coal for his eyes. I'll hit the box tool, and we'll go with, since this looks like the front of the face, we'll start building it here. Extrude it a little bit to give it some depth. Hit the return key to make it. T key to move it. Kind of just find a place there where it fits on his eye. Now maybe since we already have one of these built, we can kind of cheat and use the multiply tab using that mirror tool we just looked at. What if we mirrored this? And I'll just mirror it right there in the middle of his face. Look at that. Now he's got an exact copy. And we've got two eyes. Moving right along. So go ahead and continue this. I'll let Yenki get the idea how this works. But basically we're building a snowman piece by piece. You can add a hat with the cylinder tool. You can add a brim to the hat with the same tool, with the disc tool, and extrude it into a cylinder like we showed you. You can add some maybe something like a present next to him, like a box, or keep going. Maybe some more coal for a face or for a mouth. Give him a little smile or something. Now, we haven't talked about surfacing yet, so you don't know how to create surfaces. At this point, you're not going to be able to color them, and that's fine. But go ahead and just finish building out the snowman, and then save it. Save out your snowman. Save the object as a snowman. And use it as a reference for future use, so hopefully you'll get more comfortable, and this will serve as a reminder as to how far you've come, and to where you actually started in Modeler and what was your first character that you built in this little snowman. One thing I do want to cover before we leave and wrap this up, I'm going to go ahead and save him real quick. I'm going to save object, and yes, I will call it snowman. I'm going to show you how to send it over to layout. Even though, like I said, it's not quite finished, but that's okay. I'm going to just send it where he's at now. So I'm going to click on this button here, and it says the last option is Send Object to Layout. Click on that, and there's my snowman in Layout. And these controls work just as they did in Modeler, so you're hopefully not going to get too confused about it. Now, I'm not going to get into Layout. That's a whole other lesson, but I wanted to do this because I wanted to point out something very important. I'm going to click on the Modeler button. There's a Modeler button up here in the upper right-hand corner. Click on that. That takes me back to Modeler. And you'll notice that the grid at the bottom left-hand corner, very, very bottom, look, follow me, here's my mouse, the grid is set to 200 M. This is all, in Lightwave, the measurements are all done with the metric system. Don't panic, it's real easy. 200 meters, okay, so that's the grid size. If I hit the A key to autofit it, then that is basically the grid size that this snowman was modeled at, was 200 meters, okay? So that means that in layout, when I'm setting up my camera, I want the grid size to more or less match the grid size of my main character. So if this snowman is my main character in layout, then I would want the grid to be somewhere around 200 meters. It doesn't have to be exactly 200 meters, it could be 100 or what have you, but somewhere around that. So I'm just going to click over here again and say switch to layout this time. I'm not going to send it over again because I don't want two snowmen. Don't do that. Just use switch to layout. Now I'm back over here and I can see my snowman once again, but if I hit the D key for display options on my layout preferences, then I can see right in the middle my grid square size is set to 500 meters. Now that's pretty close to 200, so that's not bad. That's probably good enough. I probably don't need to adjust it, but let's say it wasn't. If I want to go to 200 M, then that is more exact when it comes to the scale of the object I'm working at. Now, why is this important? Simply because imagine if your grid square size was way, way off. Let's try, like, for example, 5 millimeters, 2 M's. Hit the return key, make that. Now you'll notice I can't see anything. I just see a little speck, and that little speck is my snowman. But that's because my snowman is so much bigger than my grid square size. When it's set here to 5 millimeters, grid is 5 millimeters. That's too small because in Modeler, my grid squares is 200 meters. So there's a complete disconnect. And that is really confusing to people when they start working with objects and they send them over. So let's go back for a second to that cow, and I'll give you some idea. If I load object, let's go back to my object here. Let's go to cow, my classic content, and animals. Okay, so here's the cow. You notice it's really tiny, but I can hit A to autofit it, and you can see that the cow was done at a grid size of 5 meters. So if I were to send the cow over, the cow is currently here. Here's the snowman and here's the cow. But I can't see either one of them because of the grid square size. So I hit the D key. Let's start with the cow, which was 5M. 5M. There's the cow. All right. So the cow is now visible. But believe it or not, the cow is sitting inside of the snowman. If you don't believe me, let me just zoom out a little bit. See that wall? That's actually the belly of the snowman that you see back there. It looks like a room, but it's not. We put the cow in the belly of the snowman because of the scale that we're working at. So the grid square size is now suited towards the cow at 5 meters. But if we were to go to 200 meters, which is what the snowman is built at, now we can see the snowman. And if I zoom in, there's my snowman. But if I keep going, keep going, keep going, let's go inside the snowman. Here we go. Boom. Look at that. There's the cow. So just a little warning here. Scale is important. Understanding scale is critical to how you work in Lightwave. You must understand grid square size and how that keeps things on the same page. So once again, working in Modeler, just be aware of the scale of the grid that your object is built at. Especially if you didn't build the object, you need to know the scale before you send it over and start working with it in layout. And this will give you, hopefully, a really good understanding of where to start once you send your object and you're ready to start building a scene in layout. Understanding the grid square size. I'm going to leave it there for this lesson. Hopefully this has been a good quick overview of Modeler and some of the more basic tools and how the Modeler interface works. On future lessons, we'll take a look at surfacing and layout and also some of the more detailed aspects of the Modeler interface that may prove useful for building more complex objects.